You're going to want to see this video. This simple bowl is loaded with all kinds of wood turning lessons. Hi, I'm Kent and welcome to Turn a Wood Bowl. Today we're going to talk about what appears to be a pretty simple basic bowl, but there are several lessons hidden inside this bowl. First of all, we're going to turn a beautiful black cherry bowl. That's going to be our final result, hopefully. And another big lesson we're going to have is we're going to talk about the twice turning process. This bowl has already been roughed out, which means it's been turned once to its rough shape and it's been allowed to dry. So any distortion that it's going to have has pretty much been created already, and we'll have a nice round true piece after we turn it the second time. But another big lesson that we're going to have in here is I'm going to share with you guys how I create a tenon on the bottom of this. Now, if you recall, I've had several videos that have coring in them. And when I core out a bowl, I have the largest bowl has a tenon that's made for it. Well, that tenon is on the large bowl. However, when I cut out each subsequent bowl from the inside of that large bowl, each of those is left pretty much rounded like the bottom shape of the bowl, and they don't have tenons on them. So I get a question pretty frequently that's asked is, how do I make a tenon on those inside bowls that have been cut? And we're going to cover that in today's video too. So sit back. Today's video is loaded with all kinds of great wood turning information, and enjoy. Okay, I'm going to use a jam chuck. This is a large disc jam chuck. I call it a jam chuck because I'm using the headstock and the tailstock to jam the bowl between. Some people call it a friction plate. There's other names for it, but I call it a jam chuck. And I'm just taking a measurement here. I've got 27 centimeters along the end grain length and 26 centimeters side to side. So the bowl did contract a little bit from the sides, and it's about 25 millimeters wide, or about an inch wide. This is about a 10-inch bowl. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be truing this up. Currently it's not turning completely round or true because we can see that the sides are narrower than the end grain portions. So we've got to true that up, and we've got to establish a tenon, a way to hold this on the lathe. So that's what we're going to do right now. So I use a little bit of pressure and hold the bowl in place with the tailstock, and then I hold my thumb in one place on the tool rest and see if there's any high spots or any locations where the bowl is bumping my thumb more than others. And then I make minor adjustments until I get a real even rotation with the bowl. Okay, now this is a smaller 4-jaw chuck of mine, and you would think with a bowl this size I would want to use a larger chuck. However, you got to remember I only have an inch of thickness here, the material. This bowl has been turned to about an inch of thickness, or about 25 millimeters thick, all the way across from the top rim across the bottom. So I have a very narrow area to work in the base of this. So I've got to make a relatively small tenon and not take away too much material at the base of this bowl. So I'm going to use my dividers to mark the width of the tenon. And I'm just delicately going to go through and work away the material until I've formed a tenon and a shoulder on the bottom of this roughed out bowl. Now, twice turning means just what it says. We're turning this twice. Now, this bowl has been roughed out once, and that is the rough shape that we've got currently, and it's been allowed to dry. And now that it's dry, we're going to turn the final shape. The big advantage of that is that any movement from the moisture in the bowl has dissipated, and we're not going to have any issues with this bowl moving or changing shape after we turn it now the second time. Now I'm using my detail spindle gouge to get inside the base of this tenon and make a really clean tenon. If you don't make good tenons, you can have lots of problems, and I've got a video all about tenons gone wrong. If you haven't seen it, you're going to want to check it out. All right, so the tenon looks pretty good. And I've only used a little bit of the material here, so we still have plenty of thickness in the base of this bowl. I'm using the detail spindle gouge again to narrow down this little nub that's holding on with the tailstock. And something just occurred to me. I haven't shaped the bottom of the bowl yet. I got so excited to show you guys how to make this tenon that I didn't shape the bottom of the bowl. So even though I have this very small nub on here, I'm going to go ahead and continue shaping the bottom of this bowl. I just need to be very careful not to make any abrupt movements because this little nub is my only connection for the tailstock. So I'm going to use some pulling cuts. I'm using the lower wing. This is a 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge. This is my 1/2-inch bowl gouge. And I'm making a pulling cut from the base of the bowl up towards the rim. And I'm just knocking down high spots at this point. Remember, this bowl has dried and it's distorted a little bit, so there's going to be high and low spots. And I want to make very light cuts and just shave off the high spots to even out the exterior of this bowl. Now I'm making a pushing cut, or a push cut, around the exterior of the bowl here. Again, very light, somewhat open cut. You can see there the flute is at about the 11 o'clock position, pointed to the left or in the direction of the cut. Just want to take your time and make very light passes as you go across the bowl. With the lathe off, you can see there's a little bit of high spot there up towards the rim, but all in all, it's becoming pretty balanced. We've got the material, the bulk of the high material has been removed. I'm going to make some light passes up towards the rim. See, I'm just taking very, very thin passes, probably less than 1/16 of an inch or a millimeter. And I'm making a slight concave cut towards the rim of this. I'm going to make an OG shape with this bowl, and we'll see that more in just a minute. Now I'm using a shear scrape. This shear scrape is designed to be a light refining cut or shave that's removing just a little bit of material at a time. This is great for fine-tuning a curve or an edge or a transition between two cuts in this case. Now the other thing that's interesting about the shear scrape is you want the tool rest to be almost perpendicular to the tool so you've got support. However, using my 1/2-inch bowl gouge here, I'm getting extended pretty far over the tool rest and I'm getting a lot of vibration with the tool. One way to solve that is to move the tool rest in, but I don't have space because of the jam chuck. So I'm going to use my heavier bowl gouge. The heavier steel of the 5/8-inch bowl gouge will absorb and reduce some of the vibration I was seeing with the 1/2-inch bowl gouge. Okay, so now we've got the exterior shaped, and we did it all with that little nub. If you keep the cuts light, you can get away with quite a bit with very little connection. I'm just going to take a chisel and knock that nub off. And I want to chisel with the direction of the grain. I would actually probably support this a little bit better, but I kind of want to show you guys how I'm doing this. I'm working back and forth so I don't make a deep groove. The grain wants to move down into the tenon, so I'm being cautious not to just hammer that away and tear a big hole into the tenon. Okay, we'll switch out the jam chuck for the 4-jaw chuck. We'll go ahead and mount this in the lathe. You can see there that the shoulder of the tenon rests firmly on the top of the 4-jaw chuck. Again, if you haven't seen tenons gone wrong, you probably want to check out that video if you've had any problems with tenons in the past. Okay, so I'm going to further refine the exterior of this bowl. Remember, the exterior of the bowl is the bowl. What do I mean by that? Well, here you can see all the different variations in the rim of this and based on the distortion of it from drying. What I mean by that phrase is we see the outside of the bowl and we determine the shape of the bowl by seeing the exterior first. We also feel the exterior of the bowl. So the bowl is comprised of the exterior primarily. And then the interior is basically just following the shape and the profile of the exterior of the bowl. So you really want to take your time and get the exterior of the bowl just right. Now I mentioned I'm going to make a OG shape here. Now what that means is instead of having just one curve going around the bowl, I'm going to have two curves. If you think of an OG, think of a parabola or a graph where you have a wave line that goes up and down in even directions. Well, an OG essentially has a lower convex curve and a higher concave curve that are similarly matched. I just cleaned up the edge of this, and you can see the distortion in the drying of the bowl. The end grain is thicker because it moved upward, and the side grain is thin because it pulled in. So I'm going to go ahead and true up the face of this so we have a nice level rim, so that's not throwing off the design of the look of this. Just going to make a delicate push cut across here to clean up those high spots. I made it a real light pass. You can see where it cut, but then you can also see low spots here. So we need to take it down just a little bit farther so that we have a nice even rim. So getting back to the OG on the outside, what's going to happen is it's just a very subtle OG that I'm hoping to create here, where the base of the bowl is a little bit wider or more bulbous or pushes out, and then just under the rim there's a slight curve that curves up and kind of lifts the rim up just a touch. I'm not going to make it very exaggerated. It's going to be pretty subtle. While I'm here, I'm going to even out some of the beginnings of the edge of the drop down into the interior of the bowl. Because remember, this bowl was wet when it was rough turned and put away to dry, so there's distortion and shape in there. Okay, so now you can see the OG shape. You can see under the rim how it's kind of cutting in just a little bit, and then at the bottom it's going to push out. And in the center of the side of the bowl there's a transition area, and I'm using a scraping pull cut to even out that transition, to smooth it out. You can see how it was pointed, and now it's coming down to be a more gradual, continuous curve. This is a pull cut, almost a shear scrape. If I drop the handle, it turns into a shear scrape. But this is a pull cut. It's just a lightly removed material. Again, I'm using the 5/8 inch bowl gouge. The 5/8 inch bowl gouge allows me a little bit more support because the shaft of the bowl gouge is a little thicker and heavier. Now I've dropped the handle and I'm doing a shear scrape. When I drop the handle, I'm decreasing the angle of attack, so I'm making a lighter cut, almost a shave, to balance off the material. Now I'm going to switch back to my 1/2 inch bowl gouge, and I'm just going to clean up that outer edge of the rim. All right, that's looking good. Now we'll start working on the interior of the bowl. The rim itself, typically I will drop the rim down. So from the outer edge in towards the bowl, the rim is sloped downward. I've found that just design-wise it works well, and functionally it works well. If something's on the edge, it will have a tendency to fall into the bowl. So I'm making very light cuts across the inside of the rim, angling that rim downward. Then I can readjust the tool rest and do a light scraping cut or a shear scrape to just delicately transition a smooth curve on the top of that rim. Here you can see the real fine fibers coming off that shear scrape. Just want to make very light cuts here. There are those real fine fibers. That's a nice thing about doing a twice turning. The second turning, we're essentially just refining the bowl and making it ready or finishing it off. We're not making any large cuts or passes. We're not removing a whole bunch of material or making dramatic cuts. We're doing really refined, smooth finishing cuts to take the bowl's shape to its final destination. So I'm going to work from the rim down. I'm going to establish the wall thickness to where it feels about right. That's feeling pretty good. Except my tool, I've noticed that it's not cutting quite as well. And as soon as you notice that, you probably should have sharpened your tool a little while ago. But I noticed it, so now it's time to sharpen. If you want to learn more about tool sharpening for wood bowl turning, check out my online sharpening course on my website. I also deal with shaping and customizing all of your tools and especially the bowl gouges. I have a variety of different profiles that we'll cover in there, how to shape them and how to sharpen them. It's really worth checking out. Go to my website, or you can look down in the description of this video for more information about that course and my other courses. All right, with the bowl gouge sharp again, we can really see the difference. We've got a smoother cut, it's quicker cut, and everything is cutting much cleaner than it was just a few moments ago. It's very critical to have sharp tools, especially when you have dry wood like this, or if you have hardwood. If you have like a very hard oak, for instance, you're going to want to have sharp tools, and you're going to need to sharpen them frequently. If you're liking this video, do me a huge favor and leave me a comment and let me know if you turn twice turn bowls like we're doing here. And while you're there, smash that like button for me. Thanks a lot. Okay, so I'm going to work my way down into the bowl, doing a small section at a time. And as I get down to the surface of the interior of the bowl, I'm rubbing the bevel of the bowl gouge and picking up from the edge of the previous cut. And what I'm doing is I'm sneaking up on the thickness of the wall. I'm not making any quick or deep cuts here because I don't want to go deeper than I need to be. And I don't want to remove too much material where the bowl becomes thinner towards the bottom. As a matter of fact, this bowl is actually going to be just a little bit thicker towards the bottom. And the reason for that is it's going to make it a little bit more stable. And it's going to give me a little bit more wiggle room when I shape the foot of this bowl after removing the tenon. So you want to take your time, stop the lathe frequently, check the thickness, and then just make light cuts to get to where you need to be. And the interior of the bowl, remember, we really want, most bowls we want them to have a concave curve that goes across the whole bottom of the bowl. We really don't want a flat bottom, and we definitely don't want a convex bottom. So we can just take your time and work up to it. Again, it's kind of like sneaking up to it. We just gradually keep shaving away, keeping track of that profile, the curve. I'm looking down on this so I can see the curve of the interior of the bowl really well. Make light passes. I know I've got another cut or two left here, so I want to feel it first, make sure everything's the way I want. It's feeling good. It's a little bit thicker in the bottom, and that's fine. This is also a good time to go sharpen again if you need to. A really good sharp tool is going to leave a very nice finished surface on the last pass as well. Remember, the interior of that bowl is cutting at a slower rate than the rest of the bowl, so you need to slow down your pace with the bowl gouge as you approach the center. I've got a video all about lathe speed that you might want to check out. All right, it's feeling pretty good there. All right, so now it's time to sand. What I do is I typically will sand through the different grits. I'll start with 120, then I'll move up to 180, 240, and then 320. What I'm doing here is, it looks like I might be crossing that center, but I'm not, and there's a reason for that. If you check out my video all about sanding wood bowls, you'll learn all sorts of different tips for how to sand the bowls properly, but you never want to have the lathe running and run the power sander across the middle of the bowl while you're sanding. Here I'm working the rim of the bowl just delicately. I'm actually kind of reducing that curve or that edge on the inside, so the transition between the rim down into the bowl is a little more gradual or subtle. All right, so now we've got the bowl turned and sanded. I'm going to put the faceplate or the faceplate with the jam chuck back on the lathe, and I'm going to remount this with the tailstock. And we're going to use almost the same process that we used at the very beginning. I'm going to lightly attach the tailstock and then take my time to make sure that that bowl is relatively centered on the piece. Loosening the tailstock and repositioning it as I need to until it's just right. Using my 1/2 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge, I'm going to do some push cuts into the faceplate direction. That's going to give me the least stress on this particular joint. I'm not moving across the joint, I'm pushing into the face. So we should get a good connection here. And what I want is I need the base of this bowl to be somewhat concave. I don't want the whole bottom to be flat because there's a chance that it won't seat properly on the tabletop and it'll rock and wobble around. So I'm going to make a slight concave base to the bottom of this bowl. I'm using my detail spindle gouge here because I can pick up a nice curve on it and I can remove this nub very easily with it as well. I'm going to take the 1/2 inch bowl gouge, just make a light scraping cut to smooth out the foot of the bowl, or the rim which will be the foot of the bowl. Make sure that that's nice and flat. And then I'll continue with the spindle detail gouge. Just take your time here, make light cuts. You might want to take the lathe speed down a bit as well. Now, if you're not comfortable doing what I'm doing here right now, you could take this and take it off the lathe and actually sand that whole nub down. If you use 80 grit sandpaper, you can sand the whole nub down and then level off the bottom. What I like to do there is apply pressure. Sometimes that will work free and sometimes it won't. The fibers of this wood are very strong and it didn't quite cut off there, so I'm going to have to cut that off. But we've got a relatively small nub to deal with. Okay, so I'm going to use a really sharp knife to cut the fibers, and I want to be careful to work around this and cut the fibers. I don't want to just knock it off because there's a good chance that I will pull out fibers and create, whoa. If ever there was an example of why you want to move the knife away from you, that was a good one right there. Always keep the knife away from you and keep your other hand out of the way of it. But basically, you just want to cut those fibers instead of breaking them off. If you break them off or pull them off, you could easily rip fibers out of the base of that bowl and then leave a hole there, and you really don't want that. All right, I'm using my Jacob's chuck with a 2-inch mandrel on it to sand the bottom of this bowl and level it out, make it nice and smooth. You want to move the bowl around as well. You don't want to do this in one direction. You might run a little bit of a rut if you keep it in one location. So I keep rotating the bowl so we've got a real nice even concave base on this. All right, it's looking pretty good. It's time for finish. Now I'm using my favorite finish, which is tried and true original finish. This is linseed oil and beeswax only. That's it, nothing else. And the way this works is you just apply a thin coat to the entire bowl, let it sit an hour, wipe off any excess, and then burnish it or buff it out 24 hours later. That's all you have to do. Now, it goes on pretty shiny. It's not going to be as shiny as you're seeing right here once the finish is settled into the wood. It will cure and it'll be like a luster, a medium luster. It won't be shiny, but it won't be super dull either. It's just a real nice natural look to the piece. I'm a real big fan of this. This is a great finish for salad bowls, for cutting boards, if you do things like that. I'll have this, the description, or a link to this in the description below, along with everything else that I've used in this video if you're interested. And there it is. Relatively simple, but there's a lot going on there. See that subtle OG shape? See how it just kind of cuts in just a little bit underneath the rim and it's a little bit wider at the base? That's an OG shape. Beautiful grain. I love this black cherry. After it's dried and you put a finish on it, it feels almost like porcelain. It's just fantastic wood to work with. It's a very simple bowl, but there's a lot going on and a lot that took place in the process. Okay, there we have it. A pretty simple, basic bowl, but wow, were there a lot of lessons packed in there. We learned about twice turning. We learned about how to add the tenon to an existing bowl that was pretty much rounded over from the coring process. We learned how to make really light cuts when we forgot to leave our nub in the center there. And we talked about the OG, and we talked about bowl wall thickness, all sorts of things that we've learned from this really basic bowl. So this sitting on the counter with some fruit in it or something is going to be a little bit deceptive. It looks really simple, but yet there's quite a bit of information and wood turning skills that go into making something like this. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, do me a huge favor and click that like button below the screen and subscribe to my channel if you're not already. And also check out my website, turnawoodbowl.com. Now, turning twice turn bowls has a lot of benefits. The major benefit is this wood is pretty much equalized. And equalized is another term for dry, but wood's never dry. If you take my Tree to Bowl online course, you'll learn all about the moisture in this wood and how to deal with that. But this bowl is relatively dry, and that means it's not going to change shape and distort hardly at all anymore over time. So this nice round rim is going to stay round and it'll stay true to that. It's not going to contract and deform. Now, if it were soaked in water or if it were put in a steam bath or something, yeah, it might move. But in general, in everyday household use, this wood should not move much at all. That's a huge advantage of turning twice wood bowls or roughed bowls. The other big advantage is most of the work's already done. All the hard part of roughing all that material away and creating the overall shape of the bowl, that's already done for you. So we're really just finessing the overall final shape that we want to make with the bowl. So the turning period is relatively short as well. Now, a couple downsides. When we turn dry wood like this, we get really small kind of yucky shavings that make a lot of dust, so you really want to wear your respirator like I was wearing. And they're not the fun, big, long shavings like we get when we're turning green or wet wood. But it's a clean, smooth surface when we're done that's usually very easy to sand as well. The downside of turning dry wood or hardwood is we just have to sharpen a little bit more. And as you know from my sharpening online course, sharpening is really not that big of a deal. We basically just go over to the sharpening station, tune up the bowl gouge, and we're ready to get back on the lathe and get the bowl turned. So whether it's a softwood or a hardwood, it really doesn't matter that much as long as we're using nice sharp tools. Now, if we have dull tools, then yeah, we're gonna have all kinds of problems, and this wood is not gonna turn very well. But sharp tools makes all the difference in the world. All right, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video and all the fun little lessons that were hidden inside this pretty basic bowl. Do me a huge favor, leave me a comment below, and until next time, happy turning.